at least take 3 on the cadence theory video, because I've had something wrong with each of the other videos that I've done so far. So hopefully, barring any more technical difficulties, this should work really well. And I've practiced it. It should sound great. Hopefully I can remember what I said, because I liked the first one the best, and I don't know if I can remember everything on that bet. So this is the secondary dominant video. So you should have already done one, I think, with cadences. Sent you the sheets for that. And I sent you 2 pictures of the pages in your book that are called Secondary Dominant, Unit 12. I think secondary dominants are really interesting, and this is coming from a person who didn't really understand music theory until they got to college. So one of the reasons I really think they're interesting is because when they are stuck into places, they actually add some really nice color and interest to music that if we didn't have them, music would be a lot more boring. And the most prominent way you tend to see secondary dominants used is where we see borrowing from the dominant of the dominant. And I'd say more often than not, that's where I've seen them used, but composers use them borrowing dominants from all sorts of chords in different keys in which you're playing. So if you look at that sheet, which is page 28, the one that says secondary dominant on it, you'll see that they have shown you some dominant 7s of the chords that are in the key of C. So you've got from the 6th chord, you've got the one I was just talking about from the 5/7 from the 5. You can take a 5/7 from a 4. You can take a 5/7 of the 3, and then you can take a 5/7 of the 2. And actually, this is kind of cool. I'd like you to try to play through these just so you kind of get used to hearing them. Now, if you're using your eyes and you're looking at those, it was definitely a sequence. You know, we were doing the same thing, just going down a step and doing the same thing. But you'll see that in each one of those measures, you have an accidental. And that's one of the clues that you have a secondary dominant, is because we're borrowing from another key, you have to bring over the sharps or flats that would be in that key. That's why you will see when you're doing a borrowed chord, a clue would be that you've got a sharp or a flat with it. So what they want you to do there is to write out and then play the same chord. So make a 5/7, but you're in the key of G now, but make a 5/7 of the 6th, the minor 6th chord, then a 5/7 of the 5, and so forth and so on. It's a little bit of just, you might think, a little bit of busy work, but we don't do a whole lot of this, and so I think it wouldn't hurt for you to be working on practicing writing those intervals. Because it's a sequence, it should be pretty easy. But I also need you thinking about what are the accidentals from that key from which you're borrowing. So if we're in the key of G, for instance, let's look at the dominant of the dominant. Think of what is the dominant or the 5th tone in the key of G. Well, in the key of G, it's going to be D. You need to think, when we're borrowing the dominant, you need to think another step ahead. So what is the dominant from the key of D? And then you're going to need to make sure you have your appropriate accidentals to go with that. So I'll give you that one. The dominant, if we look up from D, we count 5, your dominant is A. So you should have an A major, or an A7 chord before the 5 chord when you're writing the one in the key of G. They're going to have you do the same thing on number 2, only it's the same borrowing of the chords 5/7 of 6, 5/7 of 5, 5/7 of 4, but what they've done is they've changed the inversion of the chord. So you see, you got in number 1, you got your regular inversion, like this is how we normally do a 5/7 chord, 2 1. But we have the same notes, but it's in a different order. Starting at number 2, you get your D, and then going. So this will give you a little extra work of thinking in terms of your inversions. And you may want to go, well, we still need to do some work in the 7th chords. And I feel like, because we don't have any marking, or we just barely started, it looks like. You started it in 1 key. So we need to talk about that again, but you have the different types of 7th chords, and you got, because we use 4 notes in those, we can have 1 extra inversion, so we'll need to work on that. Don't worry about labeling anything as far as inversion wise. Just know that what you're doing is you're playing the same 5/7 chord, so the notes actually should be the same. Well, we're changing keys, so now that I think about it, no, that won't be. But you're going to use the same chord. You're just going to be using a different starting inversion. And the exact same thing happens for number 3. So you're doing all the same chord inversions, but now you're going to the key of D. So again, you're going to have to think, well, what is the 6th chord in the key of D? What is the 5 chord in the key of D? And so forth and so on. Actually, the thing I think it's most interesting is on that 2nd page, where you look down at number 4, and it says write the Roman numerals for these chord progressions which use secondary dominants. So here's where you're going to have to think. Now they've told you what key you're in, but you're going to have to try to figure out, when you're looking at that one where it says blank of blank and then the blank, you need to know, look at that 2nd chord, and I see it looks like it's an E flat major chord. So then I have to think, well, what is the dominant in the key of E flat? And I also need to know what is E flat in the key of B flat. So you might have to rewatch this if this isn't ringing any bells. We've done some of this kind of thing before, but we haven't done any borrowing, if I can remember correctly. I think this is a newer concept in one of the upper level books. So kind of work your way through those. Do it in pencil, just in case. And if you have questions about it, go ahead and text me, because I'd rather, when you're mulling over it and working through it, if I'm available, I'd go ahead and answer your question and try to make sure you're on the right track. But the first 3 exercises are just kind of copying it in a new key. You're actually just transposing those chords. You have to do a little bit more thinking for number 4. And also make sure that, just double check, notice that because we're in major keys, so for instance, like the 6th chord is a minor chord. So notice it's the lowercase letters, Roman numeral letters. So when I check it, I'm also going to look to see, did you do the proper capitalization or lowercase is for a minor chord or a major chord? Because you should be able to do that now. You've been playing piano for quite a while. We've done some chord labeling. We've definitely talked about the fact that in certain keys, chords that are built on different notes in the key are going to be either major, minor, or diminished. So that should be a concept that we're just going to build on top of now. So again, work through it. If you have questions, text me. We'll see if we can figure out. If you're really stumped, which I can't imagine you would, because you're a pretty smart guy, you could just bring it back next week. But I'd really like you to try to put some effort into this. You missed last week's lesson. So I think that it would be, it's not going to hurt you at all. So, all right. Well, have at it. Secondary dominance. It's the second 2 of the pages that I sent you pictures of. And I hope that next week I'll be able to see you face to face. Sound good?